In this tutorial, we extract XMP metadata using the pdf-xmp endpoint. The way it works is like this. From your local system, you send a PDF document to the pdf-xmp endpoint. DynamicPDF API then processes that PDF to extract the pdf-xmp metadata. The XMP metadata is then returned to the calling system as XML. DynamicPDF has client libraries for Node.js, .NET, Java, PHP, Go, and Python. You must first have a DynamicPDF API account before you can complete this tutorial. Click Login and log in to the portal. If you don't have an account, you can sign up for one free. You can sign up using your Google or Microsoft account, or you can create a local account. But I already have an account, so I'm going to log in to the DynamicPDF API. After logging into the portal, you're first taken to the dashboard. Now navigate to the File Manager, and then select Add Samples to open the Add Sample dialog. Now check the Get XMP Metadata sample. Click Add to add the sample to your Samples folder. And let's see, download fw4.pdf. After downloading, I move the files to the following folder. I assume this path for the remainder of the tutorial. Now let's review the documentation for the pdf-xmp endpoint. Click on Documentation. Then from the documentation, click User's Guide, REST API, and then pdf-xmp. The pdf-xmp takes a post request, which is the PDF we want to analyze, and it gets sent as binary in the body. And then we have three header parameters, the content type, which is, of course, PDF, and then it accepts XML, and then the authorization parameter. That, of course, is the API key that we get from the portal. Okay, for this first example, we want to run it in Postman. So go ahead and scroll down and click the Run in Postman button. It asks us if we want to simply view the collection, import a copy, or fork the collection. We want to fork the collection, so go ahead and click Fork Collection. After the collection is forked, we can now work with it in Postman. Click Environments, then click DynamicPDF API, and we need to set the environment variables. Return to the portal and go to API Keys. Copy the API key to your clipboard. Now return to Postman after getting the API key. Post the key to the current value property. Persist and then save the modified environment. Now add the pdf-xmp template. So go over to Collections and then DynamicPDF API and then the pdf-xmp template. And we need to set the environment, so go up here to the right, and where it says no environment, change that to DynamicPDF API. Now, if we go over to headers, and then you hover over the API key, you'll see that the value is now reflected from the environment. Okay, now we want to add the PDF, so go to Body, and then add the file. Click Send, and the pdf-xmp endpoint returns the XML, which of course is the XMP metadata. Now let's use the DynamicPDF.NET client library with endpoint. I assume that you have already downloaded the .NET Client Examples project from GitHub, and I assume that you have opened it in Visual Studio. Go ahead and build the solution. Open the Extract XMP Metadata project and open Program. Notice the using statement using DynamicPDF client library examples. Let's make sure they were added as dependencies. Expand dependencies and ensure the DynamicPDF client library examples project is listed as a dependency. Also, notice the DynamicPDF client library was added, and it's the latest version. Okay, now let's return to extract XMP metadata. The static main method has a get XMP metadata.run method, which takes the API key. The base path is the path to the PDF resource. Let's go ahead and check that we have that PDF in our resources. Expand the Dynamic PDF Client Library Examples project, and then go to Resources. And we see the resources there. Okay, return to the class, and we see the API key. Of course, the API key is coming from the Apps and API Keys panel in the portal. In the static main method, notice that we have getXMPMetadata.run, which takes the API key and then the path to the base path. The getXMP metadata file is in the Dynamic PDF Client Library Examples. So let's go ahead and go to it. So just right-click and then select Go to Definition. Okay, so the getXMP metadata class is the class that does all the real work. It first creates a PDF resource instance, and it creates that from the PDF. Then it creates a new pdf-xmp instance from the resource. Then it sets the API key. Then it calls the process method to actually process the PDF. If it's successful, it'll return the content. Otherwise, it'll return an error JSON message. And we want to print that out. So if it's successful, we're just going to go ahead and print the XML to the console. If it fails, then we're going to print a JSON error message to the console. Now let's run the extract XMP metadata class. Wait for it to run, and we see it returns the XMP metadata as XML. Let's consider the example using the Java client library. I assume you've downloaded the DynamicPDF API examples project from GitHub and imported it to Eclipse as a Maven project. After opening the project, open the POM file. Now let's check that the DynamicPDF client library version is the latest. It's the latest version, so let's build the application. Right-click, Run as, Maven Build. Wait for it to build. Now open the file getXMPmetadata.java. The getXMPMetadata class contains a main method which we will use to run from the command line, and it also has a public static void run method which does the actual processing. Well, that's coming from the Dynamic PDF Cloud API Examples class, so let's go ahead and load that and look at that. The Dynamic PDF Cloud API Examples class contains code to run all the examples. Let's ensure the required resources are there by going to the Resources folder that's listed as the base directory. Okay, the resources are there, so we're good to go. The Dynamic PDF Cloud API Examples class contains 3 global variables that we need for the base directory, the output path, and the API key. And of course, the API key is coming from the portal. Now go to getXMPmetadata.java, and let's look at the run method. First, it creates a new PDF resource instance. Then it creates a pdf-xmp instance loading the resource. Then it sets the API key. Then it calls a process method. If it's successful, we print out the metadata as XML. Otherwise, we print out an error JSON message. Let's go ahead and run the getXMPmetadata class. Right-click, Run as, Java application. Wait for it to run. And it returns the XMP metadata as XML. Let's consider the example using the Node.js client library. I assume you downloaded the Node.js client examples project from GitHub. I also assume you obtained the client library using npm and that you have the project opened in Visual Studio Code. Open the getXMPmetadata.js file. So first it has a static async run method, then it creates a new resource from the PDF resource, and then it loads that resource into a pdf-xmp instance. It sets the API key. Of course, the API key is coming from the Apps and API Keys panel in the portal. And then it calls await pdf-xmp process to wait for the endpoint to process. And then if it's successful, it logs the content to the console. Otherwise, it prints out the error message. And then down at the bottom, we have await get XMP metadata.run. This is to run it as the main method from the console. Okay, so now let's run it in the terminal. So type node get XMP metadata.js, hit return, and the XMP metadata is returned from the endpoint as XML. Let's consider the example using the PHP client library. I assume you obtained the PHP client library from GitHub, and that you have installed the DynamicPDF API client library using Composer, and that you have the project opened in Visual Studio Code. Open the getXMPmetadata.php file. The getXMPmetadata class contains one method, run, which takes the API key in the path, and then it does the actual processing. The API key and the path both come from the DynamicPDF examples.php file. So let's go ahead and go to that. This class is for running all the examples at once, so don't worry about all the extra code here. What we need to worry about are these global variables for the API key, the base path, and the output path. The API key is, of course, coming from the portal. The base path is the path to the resources. Let's ensure the required resources are there by going to the resources folder that's listed as the base directory. Okay, the resources are there, so we're good to go. Scroll down, and down at the bottom is code to run all the examples at once. We don't want to do that, so we want to comment it out. Return to getXMPmetadata.php, and now uncomment getXMPmetadata run. That's so we'll run this as a main method. Okay, now let's look at the processing in the run method. It starts by creating a new PDF resource from the PDF and resources. It then loads the resource into a new pdf-xmp instance. It sets the API key, and then it calls the process method. If successful, it writes the XMP metadata to the console. Otherwise, it's going to print out the error JSON. And then down here at the bottom, we have the code needed to run this actual example, get XMP metadata run. So now let's go to the terminal and run the application. Type php get XMP metadata.php, hit return, and the XMP metadata from the PDF is returned as XML. Let's consider the example using the Python client library. I assume you've downloaded the Python client examples from GitHub. I also assume that you've installed the DynamicPDF API using pip. Open the file pdf-xmp-example.py. Notice it defines a method pdf_xmp_info, and it takes the API key and the full path. Now the API key and the path, they're both in a file called shared.py. So let's go ahead and open that file. First, it sets the API key, and of course, the API key is coming from the portal. And then it sets the base path. This is the path to the resources used in the project. Let's ensure the required resources are there by going to the resources folder that's listed as the base directory. Okay, the resources are there, so we're good to go. Okay, return to the class. First, we create a PDF resource from the PDF. Then we create a new pdf-xmp instance passing in the resource. Then we set the API key. And then we call the process method. And if it's successful, we'll print out the response to the console. And then down here we have the if name main, and that runs the pdf-xmp info method. And we can use this to run it from the command line. Of course, the if name check only runs when it's invoked as a command. Okay, let's go to the terminal and run it in the terminal. So type Python pdf-xmp example.py, hit return, and the XMP metadata is returned as XML. Let's consider the example using the Go client library. I assume you've downloaded the Go client examples from GitHub. I also assume you've downloaded the DynamicPDF client API for Go using the following go get command, and that you have the project opened in Visual Studio Code. You open the pdf-xmp-example.go file. First, it calls the function new PDF resource with resource path, passing the path to the file. Then it creates a new pdf-xmp instance, passing in the resource instance. It sets a base URL. Then it sets the API key. Of course, the API key is coming from the Apps and API Keys panel in the portal. Then it calls a process method, and if it's successful, it prints the XML to the console. Let's go ahead and run it in the terminal. So type go run pdf-xmp example.go, hit return, and the XMP metadata is returned as XML. And that's the pdf-xmp endpoint. For all 6 client libraries, the processing was the same. Create a new PDF resource from a PDF on your local system. Create a new pdf-xmp instance from the PDF resource. Call the pdf-xmp instance's process method. And then after processing, you would handle the XMP metadata. Here we just print it to the console. I'm James, Developer Evangelist at DynamicPDF, reminding you, when you think PDF, think DynamicPDF API. See you next time.